All right, folks, we are live. If you are tuning in on the replay, please drop me a comment. Let me know that you are tuning in on the replay. Let me know where you're listening from. A little cheeky hashtag replay goes a long way. It's always cool to see who's listening, where you're listening from. The last episode that we had with Steve Larson there, where did we have people from? We had people from the Shetland Islands, as we normally do, which is awesome. South Africa, I believe. We had Florida. We had California. We had a ton of different places. So I love seeing where you guys are all from and listening from. Just do my check to make sure that it's working okay, which it is. So drop a comment if you're watching on the replay. Let me know where you're listening from. It's always appreciated. And if you're coming in live, I can see there's people coming in live now, which is awesome. Again, drop a comment. Let us know where you are. Say hello. And we're going to be talking a lot about podcasting today. So let us know where you are in that podcasting journey. Are you just starting? Have you got a podcast already and you want to make more money from it? Let us know where you are. Maybe you don't have a podcast, but you're interested in it. Let us know because it's going to be cool to see. Before I get started with the show, I just want to make a quick little announcement / promo, really, is we're hiring. The team is growing here. We're going through a really exciting period of growth in the business, and we're hiring. We're hiring 5 different roles right now: client account manager, personal assistant, podcast manager, where else? Marketing manager, and a sales admin person. So if you're interested in joining the team, be sure to head over to mrgavinbell.com/hiring and give us your name, give us your details, and we'll be in touch. Right, folks, I am going to get started with this podcast. I'm super excited about this. You are going to love today's guest. He is a super cool guy, somebody that I've gotten to know. I was going to say I've gotten to know pretty well over the last few years, but we're speaking off air. This is the first real conversation that I've had with this person. It's one of those where I feel like I know that guy. Lorraine, before we get started, says she's interested in podcasts. She's from Marbella, Spain, originally from South Lanarkshire. Awesome, Lorraine. Right, folks, I'm going to roll the intro, hit record, and get this party started. Hey, you are listening to the Funnels and Growth Show. My name is Gavin Bell, and I've discovered a little bit of a problem. You see, too many entrepreneurs are great at what they do, but they never see true growth. All too often, they rely on luck, hustle, and hope to grow, which, as you probably know, isn't the best marketing strategy. So in this show, I aim to uncover the secrets around creating a marketing system that allows you to build your audience, generate more leads, and acquire customers at a profit. Now, on today's show, on today's show, folks, we have someone who, after getting involved in the entrepreneurial world, does something that I really respect. He started to publish the truth of his entrepreneurial journey, sharing the warts and all. You know, not sharing the Instagram highlights, but sharing the highs, sharing the lows, sharing all the things in between, which I think is awesome. And as he did that, he started to find his passion, which was podcasting. Kind of funny that we're on a podcast. Realizing that passion, he has since created strategies that all entrepreneurs can use to successfully monetize their podcast and broadcast their message to the world. He does that through his Podcast Profit Lab. Not just that, but he's also the host of the Change Makers podcast, along with his partner, Gina Suzanne. And I am super excited to have him here. So I want you guys just to go absolutely mental. Like I always say, if you're boiling the kettle, if you are driving in the car, if you are putting the clothes in the dishwasher. It's not the dishwasher, it's the washing machine. Go absolutely crazy at home as I introduce Jamie Atkinson to the Funnels and Growth Show. Jamie,
hey, what's up? You know what? I always put my clothes in the dishwasher, and I'm always brewing a cup of tea at the same time. So I can definitely relate if anybody's doing that at home. Gavin, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It is. It's an absolute pleasure. You know, clothes in the dishwasher. It's something I've never tried. Maybe it's something we need to try. Could be.
Put it on the bucket list, right? That's the opportunity. And actually, I'm really impressed because usually when two people from the United Kingdom get together on a podcast, the very first thing they talk about is the weather. And we didn't do that until I just said that. So that's pretty good, right?
We did not, but I think the first thing we spoke about was a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Off air. So
it's hard not to, you know what I mean? It's just the way it rolls.
It's got to be the cup of tea or it's got to be the weather. But actually, I want to jump in straight into the super serious stuff, which is, so you and your partner, Gina, who, your partner in life and also your podcast host. Unfortunately, she can't join us. But a cool story about you guys is you met in a hostel in Thailand, and within 3 days started living together and traveling. So I want to know, how did that random turn of events turn into a blossoming business and personal relationship? Because that is a pretty cool story.
It's pretty interesting that we met in a hostel, and now, like most couples, we just live in a hostel environment, right? It's, carrying it through all the way. But yeah, jokes aside, it was pretty wild. I was traveling at the time. She actually had flown to Thailand to get away from guys. And she was there on a little mini vacation, literally right before Christmas. It was like 4 days before Christmas. And anyway, I met her in a hostel. And then 2 days later, she said, "Oh, I'm leaving. I'm going to this island by myself for Christmas." And I said, "Why, you don't want to go to an island by yourself for Christmas? I'll come." And I invited myself along. And then, we ended up spending that rest of the time together. She flew back to the US, and I followed her a couple months later and, got her fired from her job, and the rest is history. And, we've actually been traveling for 3 years, but we've just literally a couple of weeks ago, I've now settled down in Costa Rica, and we're here for a year, which is really exciting. But it's funny you said, let's talk about the serious stuff with the podcast, because, you'll know, and anybody who's heard our show will know, but serious. It means, make a lot of fun with each other. And I think that's kind of the exciting thing, right? You can have an exciting and fun piece of content that you put out there that also massively helps your audience as well.
Yeah, 100%. Now, you broke up a tiny bit there. I don't know if people at home or on the podcast, so we'll go into that. But I know what you were saying there was, we can create content that is fun, but is also beneficial to the audience. And your podcast is testament to that. And that I said this to Steve Larson on the last show is, there's not many podcasts I listen to. I'm not an avid podcast listener. I spend around probably an hour in the car per week, and that is my podcast time. And I'll listen to it on 2 times speed. But you and Steve's podcasts are like one of the only ones that I listen to. So I can totally testament to the fact that you guys have a lot of fun on your show, which is what we're all about.
I really appreciate that. That's super awesome. And, and I think it's interesting because people forget sometimes, but people who listen to podcasts, a lot of the time, once you get them in on a show, they get hooked. I mean, I share this statistic a lot, and most people are blown away by it. But if you look at email, right, if you can get 20% open rates on email, you're like, wow, like I've done a pretty good job there. But if somebody hits play on your podcast episode, the average person will consume 80% of everything that you put out. So, and like when you put out a lot of content on a podcast, that's people are listening to a lot of man hours of you,
Totally. Jamie, I can tell you're a podcast man, because, the first question I have here is around why podcasting? Because, I think every business owner knows, every marketer knows, everybody that's listening knows that they should be creating content. And when it comes to content, you've got 3 options, really. You've got video, written, or audio and podcasting. So why should people choose podcasting other than the fact, those stats that you just spoke of there are absolutely insane. So why podcasting for the people that are listening that are going, I'm thinking about a podcast, but I'd also quite like a YouTube channel. But you know what? I'd quite like to have a blog on my site too.
Right. Yeah. If I could just do everything at once, right? I look at Gary Vee and I look at Russell Brunson, and they do everything. So I should do everything too. Right. That's the first thing that comes into people's mind. I think the biggest reason why I love podcasting so much is, and I could literally do a 6-hour podcast episode on all the reasons why podcasting is awesome. But I think the number one reason, and I think this is super relevant today compared to other things, is that nowadays in marketing, especially where we're at with the pandemic and things that are going on, people are really craving realness in marketing. And more and more and more people are getting, censored and blinded to the business, outline that most people do, right? The flashy car, the ads, I'm this kind of business and I'm going to help you. People don't really love that as much as they used to. And we're noticing more and more with big brands out there and everything like this, that podcast as a platform is a really great way for people to see behind the film and really understand who you are. I'm a big Russell Brunson fan. I know you are as well, Gavin. And if you look at his Instagram recently, you know, in the last couple of years, he's done a lot more in showing people who he really is behind the business. You know, he talks about his family. He talks about, you know, going to church. He talks about wrestling. He tries to share more about himself because he wants to really humanize himself as a brand. He wants you to know, hey, look, yes, I love funnels. Yes, I love entrepreneurship, but there's more to me than just making money online. And what I love about podcasting as a medium is it really gives people the opportunity to learn more about that. You know, as you share these stories, because it's a conversation, because it's not you stood in front of a camera saying, I'm going to say these words in this order and I'm going to be presenting, it changes into, instead of a conscious delivery, what I like to call an unconscious flow, which is if someone walks up to you in the street and says, hey, what's your favorite thing about ice cream? You usually aren't thinking, you're just like, oh my God, I love, you know, mint chocolate chip. It just gets me going, right? It's this unconscious flow. And it's something that happens a lot with interviews and conversations more than people realize. And what I really, really love about this is that most people, when they come to podcasting, they've usually tried some of the other mediums. You know, maybe you're listening to this right now and you've tried to write and it didn't really grab you. Maybe you've tried to do videos, but you sat there in front of the video and deleted 32 takes and then eventually didn't even upload it because you're like, no, that sucked. I didn't like it. And what I love about people that come to podcasting is that they have that willingness to say, you know what, this is okay. It doesn't matter if I make mistakes. It doesn't matter if it cuts out halfway through. It doesn't matter if, you know, one person makes a mistake or says something wrong. That's part of the journey. And I think people really embrace that when it comes to podcasting. But one of my biggest personal reasons why I love it, Gavin, more than anything, is that I just got pissed off with Facebook. And when I say I got pissed off, it was for a pretty real reason. You know, they just decided one day to shut my personal profile down. And this was back in January when we were at Funnel Hacking Live. I was right in the middle of this launch and they just said, nope, see you later, pulled the plug for no particular reason. And I know a lot of people have had challenges with organic on Facebook. You know, in the last couple of years, they said it's getting harder and harder. Less of my people are seeing this. You know, less of my people in my group are seeing this. And what I really love about podcasting as a platform is it's a platform that you own. You know that if somebody subscribes to your podcast, they're going to get sent your episode 100% of the time. Not like I'm going to do a live and hopefully 5% of the people who said, I want to listen to this actually see it. And I think that's a really important thing to understand, because as you grow your business and as you grow, yourself online, what you're really creating is an online asset. And if that's something that you own, that you can take with you, then that's something that can become very, very powerful. So those are just like two of the big reasons. Like I said, I could probably do 6 hours on why I love podcasting, but hopefully that gives you guys a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally resonate with everything you say there. I mean, even you give the example of Facebook there, but I've got a couple of friends who are relatively big YouTubers, and they've got a big problem now. And YouTube isn't sending their new videos out to their subscribers.
Yes.
And even as a consumer of YouTube and somebody who subscribes to different channels, I go into my list of subscriptions now, and it's filled with like all these premiere and upcoming videos, to the point where I'm not even watching the videos that I'm subscribed to anymore, because the YouTube has just kind of ruined that interface for me. So I think that further just promotes the reason that podcasting is a good platform.
Yeah, and you're right. And it's everything. I used to have a Pinterest agency, and the same thing happened in Pinterest. And it's the same thing that happened in Google 10 years ago. And it's every single platform. And I think the only platforms immune to it is really an email list and a podcast list, which is what I like to call, all the people who are subscribed to you.
Yeah. And something else, I mean, you mentioned there was around, which I just think is awesome, is podcasting is this unconscious way of creating, which I'm like, oh my God, somebody's finally summed up how I feel about content, because I subscribed to the Gary Vee thing. Like going back probably 12, 18 months ago, I had this vision of, we would create a video, we would turn that video into, take the audio, that'd be the podcast, we'd turn the video into a blog post. And we did it for a while. And I kind of shared this, and when we relaunched this podcast, on that journey that I took. But now that we've, now I've understood that doesn't work and I've taken it all back, the podcast is the thing that survived. And I think it's because, one, I get to have amazing conversations like this with people, which I enjoy. But when I'm doing solo shows, I just sit or stand and just chat. And there's no like you say, consciousness of trying to look good and have a good background and trying to, get your message across nicely. It's kind of just a casual environment of being able to chat. And I think for those people that are listening, one of the big things that comes up when it comes to content creation is, I'm embarrassed how I look, or I'm a rubbish writer. Podcasting is one of those mediums where you can just show up and chat, and it doesn't matter how you look or, how you're perceived, if that makes sense.
I love it as well because like people have, and they don't realize this, but people have this level of genius inside of them that comes out in conversation. I used to remember that I would go to events, and we went to a particular event. It was one of the 2 Comma Club X private events that Russell Brunson ran last year. And I went into this room, and we had about 10 people sat around in a big circle, and I was sort of talking to them about podcasting. And I remember halfway through, I said to Gina, I said, go grab the microphone, because like, I don't know what I'm talking about, but when I'm just chatting and talking to people in my zone of genius, all of this incredible stuff comes out. And we ended up recording about an hour and a half worth of content, and we ended up chopping it up into these different sections. And it's just, there's no kind of agenda. I didn't go in thinking, oh, I'm going to talk about this stuff, but just in that conversation, that's where all of the genius tends to flow. And that will be the same for people listening right now. A lot of people will say, and I know Chris mentions down here, he was wanting to start a podcast, but he's struggling with what to focus on. And if you can just have conversations with people, and I really like to have conversations with my dream customers, because, and we talk about this within our strategies, within what we do in the Podcast Profit Lab, but rather than having to sell to your audience, you can even sell to people who you're interviewing, which is one of our strategies and approaches. But if you're just speaking to someone who's your dream customer and you're talking about what you do, and it's a natural conversation that comes out, that's where people are going to get hooked into the show. And that's where you have to, you don't have to think about, hey, I'm going to talk about this. It just comes out subconsciously.
Let's move on to that selling point, because what you guys talk about is really, really interesting. In terms of how you monetize a podcast, because let's be honest, everybody that's listening to this is a business owner, is an entrepreneur, and the reason that they're creating content is to make money, is to generate leads, to get more clients, to make money essentially. But the reality is of when it's podcasting, especially when you first start, is you're not going to be able to hit the numbers you need to hit in order to make a lot of money from the likes of sponsorships. So you've got a slightly different way of making money from a podcast. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, first, before I tell you how we do it, I think it's really important to just touch on that point that you just said, Gavin, because most people, and when I say most people, you're dead right, it's 99% of people think that the way you make money with podcasting is with sponsorships or running ads on your show. And while that's great if you're an existing influencer with hundreds of thousands of followers or a giant email list, the reality is that almost everybody who goes and tries to have that kind of success, 99% of them fail. And it's because they don't have that existing audience. And what we really wanted to do when we came into the podcast space was I really just wanted to fix my own problem. And my own problem was, hey, I've just started this podcast. I've been doing it for 3 months, but crap, I'm running out of money. I need to find a way that I can make sales, and I want to do it with the podcast. But look, if I can't figure out how to make sales with this show and it's not moving my business forward, then I'm going to go and focus on something else. And I ended up trying to solve this problem for myself. And it was really interesting because nowadays we have so many people that join our program who they are experts. They have programs, they have agencies, they have businesses that are doing sometimes 50, 100, 150, 300, 600, $800,000 a year, but they don't have 10,000 or 20,000 or 50,000 people on an email list. So they are experts. They have an amazing product. They have this amazing opportunity to leverage a podcast. But if you try to do it the traditional way, then usually you're going to fail. So what we discovered, and it was completely by accident, is I just started interviewing my dream customers, because I said at the time, I was actually selling funnels to orthodontists people. And I don't know if you have ever spoken to anybody who is an orthodontist, but it's usually a 60-year-old dude who works 2 days a week, who's a breath away from retirement. And it was me, this spunky 20-year-old marketer, getting on the phone with him, and there couldn't have been more incongruency between what they wanted and what I was trying to give them. So instead, I started interviewing entrepreneurs on my podcast, and I started to speak to them. I started to learn about who they were. And then one day, one of these guys that I'd interviewed, and we'd been chatting about funnels on the show, he ended up messaging me and saying, "Hey, Jamie, we were talking about funnels on the podcast. Like, can we get back on a call? Like, I want to talk to you a bit more." I was like, "Cool, yeah, no worries." We had this 30-minute conversation, and at the end of it, he wired me $2,000 via PayPal. And I was like, holy crap. Like, what did I just discover? Like, on one hand, I've been doing cold calling and doing outreach and endless emails and all of this stuff. And I had like maybe 1 or 2 clients to show for it, but they always ended up refunding the next month because of that massive incongruency between what they wanted and what I was giving. And then on this other hand, I'd had this 30-minute conversation with my dream customer, this entrepreneur, this person that I completely vibed with. And there was so much trust built up in that interview that at the end of it, he was like, "Dude, how can I give you money and how can we work together?" And it was this huge light bulb moment where I was like, wow, instead of me trying to build up a massive audience and sell to my listeners, what if I just used the podcast as this bridge to connect with my dream customers? So after I discovered that first client, I ended up trying this for a month or so, and I ended up getting 5 clients who signed up for a product or a service on the back end. I had my first 5-figure month, and it absolutely blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. So on the back end of this, as I started to do more and more of this, I sort of recognized that being an agency and delivering funnel services, it wasn't really what I loved, right? What I loved was being able to teach, and I love having a community and being the marketer. So I shifted and I said, okay, well, what if I could launch a podcast course and show people how I've been able to monetize it? And that was about 15 months ago. And we've now built the Podcast Profit Lab just to a little over $500,000 in revenue, which I'm so proud of, because the biggest thing that I love about this isn't, oh, yay, we made a bunch of money, but the people that have been coming through our podcast program in the last 12 months or so, they've generated, and we counted it up the other day, we thought it was 4 million, but actually it's closer to $6 million worth of revenue that our students and our clients have generated just through this podcast closing system. And that absolutely blows my mind, because the average person that's inside of our program, I mean, they have less than 1,000 subscribers on their email list. So these are people who don't have huge followings, but have a good understanding of how they can help people. And they're using the podcast to go and leverage that and going to get and close clients. But what I love, and what I know you'll pick up on the back end of this, Gavin, is that the cool thing about that is, yes, they're making money on the front end through the podcast interviews, but the real secret here is that 91% of the people who come through our program, they're still podcasting today. Whereas the average person, they quit after like 7 episodes. So because we've been able to show them, hey, here's how you can make money so that you feel good about doing this, those people are still publishing consistently every single week. And what's really, really powerful, and I know you have picked up on this, and I know so many people miss it, is that it's cool to make money from your podcast, but the secret is, if you can just consistently publish, you'll grow massively as a person and hugely as a business at the same time as well. So that's kind of our ethos. Hey, if we can show you how to make money with your podcast, you're going to want to do it for the long term. And that's what we help people to do.
Yeah. It's one of those beautiful moments where you're creating something consistently and building an asset, but also being able to make money yourself. But not just that, is also with a podcast is your ability to serve a wide audience of people. It's just amazing. So that's such a fun story, and I love the concept of the podcast closing. I think it's amazing. And actually from a personal perspective, it's starting to happen with this podcast too, since we relaunched the show. Like the interviewing your dream customers and things, that is all starting to happen, which is amazing. One thing I know that people are probably going to pick up on as we talk about this, because there's no doubt that the idea of interviewing your dream customers, I mean, I think this might be your example, is like, if you are trying to serve chiropractors as an agency, when you're like, don't go and interview random marketers, other agency owners. Go and interview chiropractors, because chiropractors are going to listen to a podcast about chiropractor business growth or marketing. So you're interviewing your dream customers, which I think is awesome. But something I think that people might pick up on is they're going to go, right, okay, I love this idea of making money from a podcast and having a podcast, but I'm a little bit nervous on the sales element of it and trying to make money from it. And we had Dave McCall on the show earlier, a couple of episodes ago, where he spoke about how to get over the fear of selling, and it was a really popular episode, because I think there's a big fear of selling and nervousness, and I think that people might feel, if they're bringing people onto a show podcast with the idea of we're trying to sell to them, then it's maybe not going to feel like a good feeling. I'm saying a lot of feeling.
I mean, I get this all the time. People are always saying like, oh my gosh, like this sounds cool, but I'm like nervous to go into an environment of a podcast interview knowing that I'm trying to sell someone. It's like, is this deceptive? Is this underhanded? Like there's those thoughts, right?
Yeah. So how do we get over that, or what's your feelings and thoughts towards that?
I think the very first thing, and I haven't listened to your other episode, but I would be very interested to hear what their advice was. But I think for me, especially, the number one thing is actually believing in your product, right? It's not an inherently bad thing. The world wouldn't work without selling. Every time you walk down the high street, every time you try and eat, every time you go to try and pay your rent, every time you want to go and have anything in life, there's a sales process that's happening. And if you think of selling as you just helping somebody to get what they want in their business or their life, then suddenly selling doesn't seem as bad of as a thing. And the thing that I encourage all of my students to think about is, instead of going into that environment and saying, I'm going to go and manipulate this person into giving me money, instead, I really like them to think about it. And I say, okay, what would you do if you were in a physical location? So you're in a store and somebody is coming in. As a salesperson, do you immediately think to yourself, oh my God, like I feel bad about this. Like I don't want to talk to this person because I'm going to manipulate them. No, you don't. And why is the reason for that? It's because you know they're coming into the store for a particular reason. I used to work in a sofa shop. So I always say to people, like if someone was coming into my store, they want to buy a sofa and I'm there to help them get the best sofa for what they want. If they don't speak to me, they might end up making a mistake, and then they have a sofa for 10 years that's going to be miserable because the dude's overweight and they bought one of the cushions that needs plumping every day. And he's like miserable because he's like, this sofa is terrible. I hate it. Right. So if you think of the podcast in exactly the same way, it's really no different, right? People are coming to that podcast interview and they might not be walking into a store to buy a product, but the truth is they probably need what you have, right? And you're not going to be interviewing somebody in your podcast if you have this mindset, if they don't need what you have. So when I was actually selling my podcast services and we were selling our podcast program to people on the interview, and we do it a little different now. We actually interview people for partnerships. We say, okay, who can I interview that has an audience that would benefit from what we have? Same principle, but slightly different. But when I was selling my product, what I used to do was I would be very, very strategic with who I picked. I would pick somebody that understood the power of publishing, but maybe wasn't doing it with a podcast right now. So when they come on the show, I know that they need what I have. I know, and I fully believe in my product. And I think that's the very first thing to understand is if you truly believe that your product is going to enhance somebody's life, then you should have no reservations with offering it to them. And this is the key thing that I encourage my students to think about. Don't think about selling, convincing, and persuading. Instead, just think about making an offer. Because the number one thing, and I used to be a sales trainer when I was in the sofa company, and it was kind of funny because I was about 19 at the time and I looked like I was about 12. So I would go into this store and there'd be, three dudes in their 50s who'd been selling their whole life, right? And I, this spunky guy that just started a couple months before. But the number one thing that I would do in every store that I went into as a sales trainer, and it was so funny because it's so simple, yet every time I went in, the performance in the store went up, is all I did was get them to offer every product. I didn't teach them advanced selling tactics. I didn't teach them how to overcome objections. I didn't teach them how to persuade somebody or pre-sell somebody. All I taught them was, hey, if you're sitting down at that sofa, make sure you offer them a footstool. make sure you offer them an extra chair. Make sure you offer them if they want those little slidey things under the feet. Make sure you offer them if they want to have their sofa protected. And all I did was I trained the people to make an offer every single time. And without fail, in every single store, the performance dramatically increased. Because what we do is, as salespeople, as human beings, we get in our own head. And we get onto that podcast interview. We have an amazing relationship. We, build this great connection with this person. We probably know they need what we have at the end. But maybe something I said, Gavin, you're there ready to sell a Facebook ad service. Maybe halfway through the conversation, I said something like, man, I love what we're doing with ads right now. And that one little thing that I said derails you in your mind. And you think, oh my gosh, Jamie's already got an ad guy. He's not going to want to hear what I have to say. He's not going to want to hear my offer. So I'm not even going to say to him, hey, here's what I do. Do you want it? And that little thing that happens inside our head is the secret behind why people don't have success in sales. If every single time you just make the offer, and at the end of the podcast interview, you say, oh my gosh, Gavin, this was an amazing experience. By the way, I know you've already got a podcast, but we've worked with a lot of people like you to actually help people get not only a higher ranking and make their podcast more successful, but also showing you how to make money with the podcast on the back end. I don't know if you'd be interested, but I would love to have a chat with you and see if that's a good fit. What do you think? I've at least offered my product and service. And in my mind, I might have thought, man, no, Gavin's already said on this interview, he's already said he's had some people reaching out. He's already had people say, okay, he's having success with what I teach. He's already got a great podcast. So in my mind as a salesperson, I would probably not make that offer. But actually for you, you're probably already doing that. And if I just gave you the slightest hint that you could close an extra client a month from one little tip I gave you, you as a customer are probably going to be interested in that. You're going to be like, wow, that's awesome. I'd love to chat about that, because you're already doing the thing. And that's where I think most people fall down in the sales environment. So my number one piece of advice to people is, don't think about selling, just think about offering. And this is what I love about Myron Golden. He has an incredible talk he did at Funnel Hacking Live, where he said, if you just make more offers, you'll make a lot more money. And that's the secret. He says, take all of the offers that you make in 12 months and put those same amount of offers into a month. And then take that and put it into a week, and you'll be able to make what you would previously make in a year in literally a week. And it's very, very smart, because if you can get into that mindset, you actually start to get at peace with it. You stop worrying about the sales conversation. You just say, man, if I just make an offer, I've done my job. And what happens is internally, your whole dynamic changes. And instead of being that person that's anxious and worried about the sale and worried about what's going, which is probably going to throw off the conversation, instead, you just say to yourself, man, if I can just do the interview, build a relationship, and then just make them an offer, and I'm totally okay if they say they're not interested, then that can change the entire game. And that would be probably my biggest advice.
Yeah, and I think the key to that is what you just said there at the end, is being okay with them saying no, or being okay with them however they react to it. Because the reality is, if you make 10 offers and one person says yes, right, cool, you've got one sale. You make 100 offers and the same percentage say yes, then you've made 10 sales, right? And you're making more money. So you're just making more offers and committing to making that offer, no matter how difficult or uncomfortable and awkward it makes you feel at the beginning, I think is a really cool mindset shift. That if you're listening to this and you're bought into the concept of, first of all, podcasting, and then understanding how you can use a podcast, just get into that mindset of making more offers, I think is a really cool way to look at it. Something you touched upon there, Jamie, which I thought was really interesting, and I think is probably going to be interesting to everybody listening, is you're not just using the podcast as a way to sell. You're using the podcast as a way to seek partnerships. And I think this is especially interesting if people are listening and the idea of selling does make them feel horrific inside, and they want maybe something that's like a slight edge towards making an offer, but not quite making an offer in terms of the partnership. So I guess, what does that look like for you? Is it a case of doing the exact same thing, but instead of saying, do you want to buy my product, it's a case of, do you want to do a joint venture together?
Yeah, I mean, and the partnership is even easier because you're not asking them to make a decision. You're just saying, hey, would your audience benefit from this? And the thing that I love about joint venture partnerships and partnerships in general is that what I call a triple win. It's a win for you because you make money and you sell your product. It's a win for the person you partner with because they're usually doing a 50-50 split with you. They don't have to deliver the product and they just made 50% of the profits. And then it's also a win for their customers because they get this amazing product that's going to help them to get the end result that they want. And remember, the key thing here, and it ties back to both selling or building a partnership, the key thing is having a product that you really believe in. If you know that your product is awesome and you can focus on having an incredible product and an incredible offer, all of this becomes way, way easier. There's a guy inside of my program called Brett. And I love Brett. He is actually a finance guy. He works in that really high level tax bracket stuff, right? When someone sells a super expensive condo and they have to pay capital gains tax, he has this really cool thing called a deferred sales trust, right? And it's way above my head in what it does. But essentially what he's able to do for his customers is say, hey, you don't have to pay the tax now. You can pay it in 2 years' time. That's kind of his thing, right? And he does this to an absolute T on his podcast. He actually has a 95% success rate with podcast closing. He's been doing it 6 months. The dude's got $51,000 in recurring revenue every single month on 10-year contracts. And because he's in the tax space, like 10-year contracts are pretty standard. But in my mind, I was like, holy hell. All he's done is gone and interviewed somebody and said, hey, here's this really cool thing that I do, which would be a no-brainer for your customers because you're a tax person and you have customers that do this all the time. I've got this really cool way that can let them defer it. Do you think you want to offer this to them? And that's all he does, but he does it in such a great way because he doesn't just wait until the end of the podcast interview to talk about it. He's talking about it all the way through. And I love these conversations on the podcast because on one hand, it sounds so simple. Oh, you just do an interview and you make an offer. But there's nuances to having success. And this is one of the cool things that we've been able to discover, not just from me, but from my students doing this. I get so much feedback on, Jamie, I just tried this new thing this week, right? Brett did this cool thing recently where right at the beginning of the podcast interview, I said, why don't you make sure that the very first thing you do is tease them about what you want them to do, what you want them to buy. So he wanted to do a partnership, right? So as soon as he booted up that podcast interview, what happens? It's like, hey, Gavin, what's up? How are you? And you're going to be like, blah, 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 blah. I'm good. How are you, Jamie? And then I would say, dude, I am fantastic, but I'm pretty tired. Like last week, we just had this incredible joint venture with another entrepreneur in this space. They're actually an agency kind of like you. And we were able to sell this $2,000 product. We sold like 6 of them. Man, it was so exciting, but man, it was pretty tiring. I'll be honest with you. How's your day going? And right at that beginning conversation, you can just drop that little hint, that little bit of curiosity, that little bit of I don't even know what your product is, but now I'm curious, right? You sell to agency people? Like, how does that work? I thought you were info product. And all through the podcast interview, because of the way the brain works, and this is why I love marketing, every time you step away from a problem, your brain is trying to solve that problem in the back of your mind. So you might put that on hold and say, oh, I won't worry about that now. I'm just going to focus on the podcast interview. But as you're doing that interview, your brain is working on that problem in the background. So much so that when we've done this with our podcast interviews, I've had some people that right in the middle of the interview, I'm interviewing them about their product and they can't wait. They're like, Jamie, I've got to ask you about this JV thing. I did an interview with one of my friends and she literally did that. And I always show people that example of the interview because it's hilarious, because I said one tiny thing at the beginning just to spark that curiosity and I left it. And then what happened was she then came to me. And halfway through that interview, she's just like, okay, that's it. I got to talk to you about this partnership. I would love to get my audience doing the podcast stuff. Let's make sure we do that at the end of the interview. Anyway, what was your question? And it's really cool because what it does is instead of you being an outreaching prospect, right? Instead of you saying, hey, I want to talk to you about my product, it turns it into an inbound lead where they're coming to you and saying, hey, I want to talk to you about what you do. So that, hopefully that gives you guys a couple of cool examples. And honestly, I can't even remember what the original question was now, but hopefully I answered it, right?
Yeah. I mean, the question that you kind of started to answer was the question that I had in my head at the beginning of that initial question, which I actually can't remember what it was either. Um, which is kind of funny, which is kind of, if you're doing an interview show, which a lot of podcasts are, I know that a lot of people are going to be thinking, okay, I get it. I love this idea. But how do I, when I've got somebody on, a big influencer or somebody that's busy and they come onto the show and they've got a 30-minute slot and then they're off, how do I, without being pitchy, let them know like what I do? Because the conversation is going to be about them and the guest. So how
Yeah.
do you get them to know about what you do and without being like a full-on pitch?
Yeah, no, I love this, and actually, there's a great interview that and I bring Brett up a lot now because he's just so good at this process that we have. But Brett just did an interview with Kevin Harrington, and obviously everybody knows Kevin Harrington, but if you don't know Kevin Harrington, he's basically the creator of the infomercial. He was one of the original sharks on Shark Tank. The dude is literally an incredible salesperson. So when you get him on the show, you might be thinking, oh man, like this dude's got limited time. How do I talk about my product? And you do just exactly what I just said. One of the things that I love and the way that you can position this is the very first thing is make sure that you allocate enough time. So if I'm doing a podcast interview, I'll say, Gavin, it's going to be an hour. It's going to be from 10 a.m. until 11. But then I'm going to make sure the first 10 minutes is, without the camera rolling, we, building a relationship, off air. So there's no pressure. They're not feeling like they have to be showy. And that starts the real relationship, the real connection. Then I usually do about a 20 or a 30-minute interview. And then I make sure that there's 20 minutes left at the end where I've got time to carry on the conversation. And the thing that I do is as soon as the interview stops rolling, I continue to ask questions. And I'm like, okay, oh my God, we're finished. Amazing. That was an incredible interview. Dude, I was so curious when you started to talking about, selling those beach houses. Like, what is it really like when you start to speak to them? And I just carry on the conversation. And what happens is the wall drops. The polished and professional person that's on the podcast interview steps away and it goes back to the real human being. And what I found is that when the walls drop like that, it becomes much easier, again, to talk about what you do and how you help people. But the other key thing that I really like is to remember that you are the interviewer. And that means that you control the questions. And I teach something inside of our programs with podcast closing, which we call controlling the narrative. And this idea is very, very simple. But if you have a product that talks about Facebook ads, what you want to do is you want to have all of your questions and your conversations to be all the things that are surrounding what you do. And it's the old MLM trick where you don't talk about the product, you talk about everything around the product until the prospect asks you about it. It's exactly the same thing. It's this idea of if you are talking to people about organic traffic and paid advertising, and you talk to them about self-liquidating offers, and you talk to them about call funnels, or you talk to them about high ticket, all of these conversations are around what you do. And that gives you the opportunity to jump in once they say something and say, you know what, that's exactly like Brett, right? Like we just did in this interview, I gave you a real life testimonial and case study of somebody that used my podcast closing system. And I gave you an example. So some of you now will be thinking at the end of this interview, you're like, man, I'm curious. What's controlling the narrative? Man, I'm really interested in seeing that Kevin Harrington interview where he does podcast closing with Kevin Harrington. Like, I'm curious to know more. And just like the audience is curious, the person that you're interviewing is usually going to be kind of curious about this as well. And I love this, especially for partnerships, because most people forget that people buy from people. And if you were going to walk up to somebody, and this is the number one mistake that people make with the Dream 100, or if you guys aren't familiar with Dream 100, basically making a list of 100 people that you want to partner with. And the biggest mistake people make is they don't treat them like a human being. Like if I met you for the first time, Gavin, and I walked up to you in the street and I just shoved a present into your hands and said, hey, I've got a gift for you. You'd be like, who is this weirdo? Did he just like poop in a box and give it to me? Like he's obviously tapped in the head, right? You would be thinking that's super weird. Why? Because we have no prior relationship. Yet when you do the Dream 100, people think that's how you do it. They say, oh, I'm going to send them this gift box because I read it in a book and that's going to work. And they forget that it's all about the real relationship and the human connection. So instead, like if you actually have a conversation and you chat and you just become friends, and then maybe you follow up and you say, dude, like after that interview, I thought of you, and like maybe I send you a little mug or something, you know. And I have a buddy, Austin Dixon, and we actually became friends from a podcast interview, but he loves golf. So, you know, a couple of days ago, I sent him a golf gift for his birthday, you know, and I know when that gift gets there, he's going to really appreciate it. And the thing is, this isn't me trying to manipulate this relationship. I'm genuinely friends with Austin. Like, he's one of my best buddies online. But I also know that we aligned for a strategic purpose. I know at some point in the future, there's going to be a situation where he needs me or I need him. And because we're friends, we're going to come together. And I've done that with, you know, so many different people. And I think that's the important thing to remember when it comes to partnerships. It doesn't have to be, hey, I'm going to do a 20-minute interview and I'm going to close you on a partnership. Now, it can happen like that, and it frequently does, but you have to be willing to let that very normal and natural human relationship actually occur. Think about like if you were going to make friends with somebody and then offer to throw them a party. At what point is it acceptable for you to say, dude, I want to throw you a party? Well, if it's 20 minutes after you just met, the person's going to think that you're trying to kidnap them, right? But if it's a week later, after you've built that relationship and you've gone out for dinner a few times and you've hung out, like that's not a problem. That's totally normal. And I think that's what we always want to remember is in this situation, the tactics and the strategies, they work, but only if you act like a human being. And people forget that sometimes. And this, I think, is one of the key things that people learn from podcasting and podcast interviews is you learn how to be a great relationship builder. And that's going to serve you so well in the future of your business because you suddenly, and, you know, I kind of joked to my dad the other day because, you know, we come from not a poor background, but not really a well-off background. And I was joking with my dad and I said, Dad, you wouldn't believe this, but I've got 20 millionaires in my phone book who, if I texted them and I said I needed help, they would offer and help me. And one of them's a billionaire and one of them runs a $100 million company. And he laughed and he says, you're full of shit. And I said, no, that's legitimately that. And that sounds kind of like a bit braggy and a bit arrogant. But the truth of the matter is that when you interview people who are above your station of where you are, not only do you build these incredible relationships, but when you interview people who are more successful than you, people start to see you on that level. You gain a little bit of their authority. And the more and the more and the more that you do it, you're building these amazing relationships and connections. You're opening up doorways for future partnerships. You're learning how to be a great communicator. But more importantly, you are expanding your network. And if you can figure out how to make money and build genuine connections through that process, and you're also publishing and you're growing as a human being from interviewing and you're building all these relationships. That's why every time we have people coming into our program, I always find that 3 months in and 6 months in and 9 months into their podcast, they have these explosive growths in their business. And it's usually not because they figured out a new tactic or they figured out a new strategy. It's because they personally have started to grow and expand because of the relationships and the connections they've been building. So I think it's something that most people don't talk about, but it's also, I think, the key behind why so many people start to get these crazy levels of success after they start publishing. It's learning how to be a human and have relationships, you know?
Mm. What I love about that is we've spoken a lot about the kind of tactics around podcasting and podcast closing and you know how to make money from a podcast. What you've just done there is you've it's almost like yin yang. It's like, yes, those tactics and those strategies are there, but also understand that it's not you have to close every single person within the first 20 minutes of speaking to them. It's a case of we are all humans. We all need to build relationships. Now, Jamie, it's now time to really get to know who you are. It's time to play a game.
It's time for the game round. It's like the Highland Games, but on a podcast.
The rules are simple. I have 10 cards here. It's a 5-second rule. I'm going to read out 10 different statements. I have no idea what those statements are. And you simply have 5 seconds to give me an answer for each of those statements. So it might be something like, name 3 types of ice cream, and you've got to go strawberry, chocolate, vanilla within 5 seconds. You ready?
I think so. Hopefully, I don't ruin my relationship by saying something wrong, but there we go. I think it's going to be fine.
Okay, here we go. Name 3 news or current affairs. This is tough. Name 3 news or current affairs TV programs.
Oh, shit. I don't even watch the news.
Time. That's a tough one.
Yeah. Facebook? That's where I get all my news information from. I'm not doing very well. 0 points.
Name 3 famous men with mustaches.
Oh, man. Abraham Lincoln.
Time.
Jackman.
That's tough. Here's an interesting one that you might get because you're from the UK. Name 3 towns or cities in Wales.
Oh, Powys, Cardiff, and Abu Dhabi.
I don't even know if that's right, but you got it in 5 seconds, so we are off the mark. You got one.
Oh my gosh.
This one, this is a fun one because I don't know whether it's right or wrong. Name 3 things you most hate or hated about school.
Oh, a lack of focus on how to make money. Starts too early.
Time's out.
That's
Lucky.
it.
Name 3 honeymoon destinations.
Oh, Bali, Sri Lanka, and Barcelona.
Nice. Name 3 types of bird.
Oh, God. Pigeon, eagle, pheasant.
Nice. There we go. We're off the mark now. Name 3 things to eat or drink at a football game.
Hot dogs, pretzels, and a bacon butty.
Nice. Name 3 things that you might give to charity.
Money, time, and my girlfriend. She's great at charity events.
Got that just in time. Name 3 things that you tie.
Oh, wait, I missed that one. What was that?
Name 3 things that you tie.
My shoes, a football match, and...
Time's out.
No.
Not.
Ties are not. I don't know.
Last one. Name 3 types of herb.
Oh. Lemongrass, sage, parsley.
You got it. Boom.
What we've learned from this game is that I have very bad mind retention.
Well, you got a respectable score in the end there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 out of 10.
That's right. Yeah.
Bad. It's not
Yeah,
bad.
my dad's really good at these games because he listens to the radio every day, and I don't flex a lot of those muscles. So maybe that's a sign. Maybe I should do that a little more.
Amazing. Jamie, we are coming up to the end, and normally we do a rapid fire round, but I am aware that you may need to jump off. So what's your timing like?
I'm good. If you wanna go rapid, I'll go rapid with you.
Let's go rapid fire round.
Time for the rapid fire round. 10 questions, 10 answers, no context. Are you ready?
Super quick. I've got 10 questions. You've got to give me an answer, but you're not allowed to give me any context to that answer. Okay?
Okay.
Yes. What is your favorite book?
Harry Potter.
Nice. What's your favorite word?
Shit.
Oh, is that the word or is that the... Nice.
Yeah, I think that's the word.
Let's go for it. What's your most hated food?
Oh. I don't know. I love every type of food. I'm going to say artichokes. Sorry, that was supposed to be quick, but that was very difficult.
No, you don't have to be quick here. You can take as much time, although it is rapid fire round. What is your biggest pet peeve, either business or personal?
Gossip.
What was your dream job as a child?
I can't remember. I don't think I always wanted to run my own business.
Nice. Awesome. What's your favorite music genre?
Drum and bass.
I wouldn't have put you as a drum and bass man. Are you a morning or a night person?
100% a morning person. Used to be a night person.
And what's your drink of choice?
Oh, a good tall glass of beer.
Oh yeah. And would you rather cuddle a baby panda or a baby chimpanzee?
Oh, 100% a panda.
Yeah.
Does anybody say chimpanzee for that? Can't be.
Well, I used to have the question as baby panda or baby penguin, and everybody said panda, so I kind of swapped out penguin for chimp, but everybody still says panda. So I'm gonna have to come up with something cuter than a
Pandas are the most cuddliest animals in the entire animal kingdom.
No, I'm gonna have to think hard about that one. Jamie, and the final question here is, what is one parting piece of advice you'd like to give all of the listeners?
The number one piece of parting advice I would give you is get out of your head and just start publishing. As the number one thing that I did that massively shifted my business. And it was to stop worrying and just to start sharing the ugly truth, warts and all, of exactly what was happening. And once I did that, my whole life changed. So that would be my advice.
I love that. And, to speak to that is, I think still to this day, the best article I've ever written is called something like The Ugly Truths of Being an Entrepreneur. And it's like, you're lonely, your anxiety, but that's what everybody resonates with. Jamie, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. So, if anybody's listening and they're thinking about podcasting or they are doing podcasting, I just know that they will have taken a huge amount from that. So I thank you so much. Let everybody know where they can listen to your podcast, where they can see everything that you do, consume everything that you do, and all the amazing stuff that you do.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Kevin. And if you guys want to listen to our podcast, it's much more entertaining than just listening to me, because it's me and Gina together, and she's honestly hilarious. So you guys can go to changemakersmovement.com/podcast. And you'll be able to get the direct link and go and listen to our live podcast there. And also, if you want to learn more about how to create your own successful podcast, how to launch it, how to monetize it, you can actually go and join our free Facebook group, which is called Podcasting 101. If you go into Facebook and just search for Podcasting 101, you guys will find it. And actually this week, we're about to launch a free 5-day challenge and 5-day course showing people how to monetize their podcast in 5 days. So if you guys want to learn more about it, please feel free to jump inside of there and just ask the question, hey, how do I get the free 5-day monetization course? And we'll make sure to hook you up with access.
Yeah, guys, go ahead and do that. I'm part of the Facebook group. Like I said at the beginning, I listen to the podcast. Go and listen to their stuff. Go consume Jamie and Gina's stuff. It's really, really good. And if you enjoyed this show, you will enjoy what they do times 10. If you did get something from this, please be sure to screenshot your phone right now, share it over on Instagram, Twitter, tag me and Jamie, or Facebook, wherever your favorite podcasting platform, whatever your favorite platform is. I can't speak. And let us know what was the one takeaway that you took from today's show. Jamie, once again, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Gavin, it's been fun. Appreciate it. And I love the quick fire round. Lots of fun.
Awesome, man. That is us done. That is the podcast wrapped up. I appreciate we ran over there. So thanks for agreeing to stay on for a few more minutes. We are still currently live. Some good comments coming in. People are enjoying this. Izzy,
hey, Mom, I'm still live.
Bruce, Chris. Awesome. Guys that are watching live, if you enjoyed that, if you're watching on the replay, please go and check out Jamie's stuff, the Changemakers podcast, over on the podcasting platform of your choice. And also check out the Facebook group. It's what? Podcasting 101? Is that it, Jamie? Is that the right name?
Yeah, you guys can just go to Podcasting 101. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it.
Awesome. Cool. Amazing, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in live or the replay. I love you, and I'll see you all very, very soon.